Hello. Is the church still a church, or is it a parody of what the church should be like? Now, I'm going to address this. I am Catholic, and a traditional Catholic at that, so I'm going to refer specifically to the Catholic Church, but you might find what I'm going to say applicable to your own church. I don't know whether it will be the same or not, but for my part, I'm going to be rather critical, perhaps even brutal with mine. Chesterton said, good old Chesterton, he always comes very handy to when we want to say something in a very concise way. He said that dogmas or doctrines are like the key which opens a lock, and to the extent that one renounces or disavows these dogmas and these doctrines, the key gradually sort of almost melts away and is no longer useful to open the lock at the end. Should the Church stand firm in defense of Christian doctrine and dogmas, or should she adapt and follow public opinion, or is there a halfway? The Church can only be the Church if it fulfills its mission. And its mission is to transmit the faith such as was handed over to her, and transmit that faith, the same faith that Christ transmitted to his apostles. There is nothing else. If the Church disavows this mission, it ceases to be the Church, is there as a sort of a parody. The Church has duties and obligations which she has no authority to renounce, cannot renounce. And if she renounces them, the Church has stopped being the Church. That's it. If, let's say, the Pope stops affirming the Church, and if the cardinals stop affirming the Church, and the bishops stop affirming the faith, and priests that might do the same, although in my experience, most priests are very good priests. That might not be your experience. In mine it is. It's not really the priests. It's the hierarchy. If they stop fulfilling their ministry, then obviously, for all intents and purposes, they have renounced their position. They are there, the jury, not de facto. I know that a priest or a bishop continues to be a bishop if he has been ordained. Always a priest in the order of Melchizedek. But if they no longer do what they are there to do, well then, they're just playing a role in a pantomime. Now, a word of caution here, because even if the whole Church was to apostate, that is to dissent or to betray, to go over to the enemy, to be the enemy, that is, even supposing the Church had renounced its mission, a Church that has perverted the sacraments, that has adulterated the gospel, even then, our faith remains, our faith maintains, I'm sure, that every true believer receives direct assistance from God, even supposing the whole eclipse of the Church, let's put it this way. We are seeing some very disturbing signs that this is happening. I don't know whether the present Pope and his anyway, what he's doing. I don't know whether he has gone mad or whether he always had this intention. But I don't care. I'm not going to talk about the Pope. I don't care about it anymore. He's well gone. But even then, God would guarantee assistance to the believer. The believer will not be ultimately abandoned. So, yeah. But the church cannot, must not genuflect to the world, must make an effort, because the Catholic Church believes in a God that incarnated, and therefore the Church has to incarnate itself also in different epochs, different times, yes, different cultures, languages. I accept that the Church cannot address the people in the 21st century exactly as she addressed the people in the 1st century. But it must try to make herself understandable to them, speaking to the people in terms that they can understand. And this is legitimate. I don't have a problem with that. Strategy that makes herself more comprehensible, participating in, of course, in public debates, issues that are of concern to everyone, yes. But even then, what the Church can never do is to disavow the deposit of faith that she has received. The Church cannot renounce the deposit of faith, which is what it's doing right now with, these many in the hierarchy who appear to be blind and numb and deaf. All his mates, all those who he is promoting, and is excommunicating all the good bishops and the good priests that want to continue to teach what the Church has always taught. The Church does have to do an exercise in self-criticism, above all to question its submission to the rules established by the world. I have dealt with this in the previous video. The Church has to stand erect and firm and self-assured against the world. The world, as in the other video, to understand the world in its theological meaning. The Church has to stand on its doctrines and beliefs, which does not mean naturally denying the world, since precisely it does its work in the world, but with a different horizon. Its work in the world is in the world. She cannot break away from the world. She is in the world but not of the world, as I said again in the last video. But it cannot accept the methods that this world imposes on her, because, among other things, what the world actually seeks is its destruction. What the world always sought was her distraction, and especially in these 300 years, let's say since the Enlightenment specifically, which was to turn the Church into a poodle dog. What it has been seeking in the last 300 years, I say, and what it has finally achieved now, it seems, in our era, is to make of it an entity that is like a footman, a servant, to make her kneel before the world, follow and obey the world's commands. We are seeing it today. these horrific visions. Well, we have, hardly visions, but these efforts that the church has made and is still making to, let's say, acclimatize itself to the world, to adjust, to conform to the mandates of the world, and to accept them in an absolutely acquiescent, compliant, humiliating way. Oh, please accept me. They seem to cry. Of course, I'm talking here about the hierarchy in the Vatican. And not only the Vatican, they are everywhere. The premise on which the world operates is not to make the church, is not to make Christianity, as we are witnessing, more agreeable, more likable. Quite the contrary. What the world can do, what the world is clearly doing, since it has tamed her, domesticated her, and brought her down to its knees. What the world is doing and has been doing for more than 200 years now, I say, is to calmly engage day in, day out, to bring out all the crap that's there, which the world, by the way, helped and encouraged to fill, and throw it back at her on her face in public as openly and as often as possible. We know that it started in the seminaries, corrupting the seminaries, etc., etc. There is a certain degree of blackmail too. There is a certain degree of having been Epsteined, as we were. All these things being thrown at her. Some true, some false, some so and so. But there they are. To have her absolutely on her knees. We see that happening to politicians now. Which is what has happened and what is happening at the moment. And, of course, the Vatican complies. Let's talk about those in public life. Let's say not only the church hierarchy, but let's say politicians, academics, journalists, judges, artists, personalities. Let's talk about all those. If I were to ask some politicians in the current, right now, for example, in the police there. Let's say if I were to ask some politicians in the American government, for example, okay, or in any parliament, this question. To go to another religion as an example. For example, are you a politician who is Jewish or a Jew who is a politician? What would the response of many be, do you think? Well, this is an example, so let me ask the same question of Catholics or Christians. I will refer to Catholics because that is what I know, okay? I don't know what is going on inside your church, but there you go. Can I ask then the same question? Are you a politician who is Catholic, or are you a Catholic who is a politician? I could go down the list. Are you the judge? Yeah? If you are a Catholic first, then obviously you have to have a Catholic vision of life. Naturally, in politics, the way through which men come together in the polis, in the city, in the community, in the nation, you understand that problems have to be solved for the good of the community, if that is the Catholic cosmovision of life. And here I believe lies the first problem. The first problem that many Catholic politicians do not assume, and not only politicians but everybody else, including of course and especially so the hierarchy of the church. But let's talk about politicians first. First problem. The reality is that Catholic politicians have accepted the idea that the faith is a sort of a compartment, is a box you tick. As if life was a series of individualized compartments, each with its tick box, rather than a whole. This is what I mean. A list, a little box, a compartment that you tick. There is the religion tick box, the politics tick box, the economy tick box, the social and the sports tick box, the cultural tick box, a series of tick boxes in that list. And one of them is religion, tick box. And the way they understand these tick boxes to me is that in each of the other tick boxes that are not the religion one can have his own views, his own political ideas, his own economic ideas, his own social cultural ideas, separate from religion, at the margin of that faith which proclaims is too big a word nowadays. No one proclaims. Rather, they turned the gospel upside down. I mean, no one proclaims from the rooftops, of course. Rather, they kind of come to you and whisper softly in your ear. No one proclaims. No. Why the whispering? What is the root of this error? Well, I believe that the root of this error has been sought in the decision of the ecclesiastical hierarchy to accept what is there and to become compliant and servile in their attitude to the world, of accepting political ideologies and forgetting the foundation upon which doctrine lays. First, to combat many of liberalism, let's say, liberalism philosophies. Rather, they considered that they had to become part of that political philosophy, of that political movement. And they didn't worry about the rest. There were many of us. Changes in politics could be done through many, through democratic means, through political movements and policies. And they saw no problem there adapting and accepting these ideologies. They accepted the ideology and decided to work with it, alongside it. And then, lo and behold, the church realized that the church discovers that liberalism actually was a kind of a broth where all those other ideologies that were going to come out of it were being cooked, sometimes presenting themselves as contrary to that very general liberalism philosophy, sometimes posing as its enemies, sort of struggling against it, fighting against it, but they are all these other postmodernist ideologies are all sprouting out of liberalism. Oh dear. All these other ideologies, all these other anti-Christian ideologies sprouting about. And now then, what do we do? The church asked. Answer, well, we will adapt to them too. In other words, liberal democracy is slipping out of the hands of the church, and so they decided to adapt to all its other ideological ramifications. And so now we have, according to different moments, we have Catholic politicians who are liberal politicians or conservative politicians or progressive politicians or social democratic in other countries or Christian democratic in another countries or nothing at all. But they keep ticking that box, the religion box, that box that is actually becoming a smaller and smaller tick box with time. But quite at home now, voting for non-Christian solutions to political problems, economics, social, etc., cultural. So they are Catholic or they are Christian and they tick the religion box, but they are okay with everything else that is anti-Christian. That is the tragedy, that is the drama of today. And each of these ideologies and each of these other political parties and political ideologies, all born out of the classical liberalism, they are all actually passing the same, approving the same policies. Many, as I said, specifically anti-Christian policies. We all know what all these movements are around the world, those parties who have gone on to approve, and let me just say the usual example, so that everybody understands, that have approved with no problem divorce, abortion, all the rest of it. But then the church, you see, continued to want to adapt to each of these movements, to each of these ideologies, flirting with each one. First one, then the other, accepting their stand. Never herself standing erect, and at least complain or do something loud and clear, creating movements to oppose those anti-Christian visions, nefarious anti-Christian attitudes that these ideologies have towards the community as a whole. The political foundation of a Catholic cosmovision, a vision of the world, had always been the common good, the community. In liberalism, how it started, establishes, more importantly, there was a major change there, that each person has to seek his own good, and that the good of each person is perfect as long as it doesn't interfere with the good of the other person next door. This is the idea behind the concept. I think is terrible, I think is destructive, I think is corrosive, because it leads to the consequences it leads to, that a society is simply made up of independent, itemized individuals. And yes, in a society, it is possible for many religions to coexist, that's all well, fine, as well as one does not bother the other religion, fine. But here's the rub, that democracy had originally been viewed as strictly a form of government. What system of government? Well, the people represent, choose their representatives, and the representatives represent them, and that is the form of government, and that was what democracy meant, a system of government. Because a society has to be governed, has to have some organization, obviously. It was an excellent idea for the people to choose their representatives who would govern. But it was strictly a form of government. But now is no longer just so. In reality, as time went by, it has become no longer a form of government, a system of government, but a function of government, the foundation of government. It has become itself another religion. And that religion, liberal democracy, will accept that each one can have his own faith. You can believe, that's fine, okay? You can believe in Christ, you can believe in Muhammad, you can believe in Buddha, you can believe in Michael Jackson and Messi, or you can believe in Spider-Man, or you can believe in nothing. That's fine. As in the Roman Empire, you can have as many religions as you want and as many gods. All the gods are welcome, that's fine. But as long as you accepted one thing, as long as you accepted that the emperor was divine, which was fine with everybody else except with Christians who would not accept that the emperor was divine. But religion itself, no problem. Name your god in the Roman Empire, that's fine. They can all be, they're all accepted. And all this is, of course, is stupendous. It's absolutely fine. But do not for a moment believe that just because you believe, or you happen to believe in Spider-Man if you want, you are going to be able to do anything contrary to that emperor. Because that emperor that actually has become this progressive liberalism now, that main religion now imposes itself on you and expects you to comply. You can have your own God and your own religion as long as you don't question our religion. And I'm not talking here about democracy as a system of government, you understand, but as everything that is done and imposed on people in the name of liberal democracy. All they have to do is to invoke the word, oh, but this is liberal democracy, and everyone has to obey, whether it is or not. Even Christians, when policies are obviously anti-Christian, not allowed to raise your disapproval, cannot move a finger against it. And this is what is happening to Christianity today, and specifically to the Catholic Church. The faith has continued to maintain, in fits and starts really, its vision of the world, but today's overall vision of the world is totally different. it has been different really since the Reformation, for Pitt's sake, but it has been different certainly since 1717, very different. That is when Cromwell, who was a radical Puritan Calvinist, one of the things that he did was to allow the Jews to come back to England, for example, whom they had been expelled from England in, I believe, the 12th century. I think it was 1212 when they were expelled. But anyway, Cromwell welcomed them back, okay, made deals with them, and that fusion came to be what would eventually give rise to, together with other things, the individual and so on, to what we have today that we call the capitalist system. I think the first one to call it capitalist was Karl Marx himself in his book Capital. Huge volumes in which he explained how this new economic system worked. Yes, of course, and every student has to learn in the humanities, certainly, that old book from, I think it was 1904, from Weber's The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, where it tells us that actually Protestants work harder, they had a certain ethic towards work, and that is why their societies were more successful. This is a book that is there, and every student has to read, as it were. Of course, it has been a long time since I read the book, but I am not sure now what evidence he put forward. This is what I mean. There is no question that these countries became more successful in terms of wealth and riches. Why? I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who is Indian was telling me that in her community in India, when she was young, she remembered how, for example, people had a different vision that was not, you cannot say was 100% capitalist. In other words, people would get together individually or in families or neighbors. They would create a sort of a group, a society, and each family, let's say, would put some money every month. Every month, everybody had to put in some money into this pot, and then, according to what they had agreed beforehand, every 3 months or every 6 months or every year, the whole pot would be given to one family. So every 3 months or 6 months or whatever it was, whatever you agreed to, you would receive this whole bunch of money. In other words, it was a different kind of a savings system. I know it's rather simple, but instead of you putting the money in the bank, they would actually put it together, and then every so often you would get the big pot. Well, it's a different way, in small communities to help one another. Because what happens now is that we put our money in the bank, and the bank deals with it, and invests money, and hopefully they do it right, and they keep the profit with the money that you have put there. You don't get anything out of it. They make the profit. You just put the money there. And they can play with it. And the profit comes to them, doesn't come to you. Well, in this other, more rudimentary way, at least every 3 months you would have a big pot. And it is true also that, other cultures, other societies in warmer climates have a different culture. They're more, probably because nature has been sort of more generous with them, sunshine, and so, you live out in the streets and you can just sit there under a tree that, and there you have dates and figs and olive oil. While in the north you have to work 24 hours just to get a little bit of barley. So it is not clear to me that it is only because people work harder. I don't think he provided any evidence why a person in a northern country works harder than a Hindu or a Muslim or anybody else. It's not a question of working hard, it's a question of how the system works. But in any case, I'm getting on tangent here, but it's not only in finance, it's culture and education too. Now, yes, if you want to take your children to a Catholic school, what do they teach them at Catholic schools? Are children taught, or to use the old-fashioned word, formed? That meant taught educationally and formed them in the faith, morally. Are they taught or formed in the Catholic faith? I'm just picking out the Catholics because that is what I know. Or have they also fallen into the same trap of, clouds and rainbows and things? Perhaps it's not totally a choice, their own choice, that they don't get formed in the faith. Because the main overall religion, really, the emperor, the religion of American liberal democracy, insists that its own dogma be preached at all schools. Otherwise, you might very well be out of the school business, even though you can tick that little box, religion. And the problem with the Catholic Church for the last 200 years is that it has been adapting to that other religion. That is the reality of it. Right now, the Church, what can it do? It can do very little at all. Practically nothing. And she can no longer do anything about it because it accepted the rules of the game to begin with, the rules of the game who wanted always to harm her, the rules of the game that left the Catholic faithful unprotected because the Catholic Church disavowed her own Catholic social policies and social cosmovision. The Church renounced its own understanding of politics of the community, and therefore the Catholic vision of political problems and of all kinds of problems derived from politics and economics and culture and society, we no longer have Catholic solutions to them. Catholics have to adhere to solutions that are not Catholic solutions. She has to adhere to liberal or from other ideologies that reacted against it, but accepted nevertheless the whole liberalism or liberal progressivism now assumptions. Progressivism is, something else, but within the same dynamics. And this is the underlying problem. And this is the great drama and tragedy of our day, until today, from then on. But, do not despair, because I think things are going to change. I really do believe so. There is an earthquake coming. A political and cultural earthquake coming. And I think we can all see it in politics and otherwise. Because the elites now have gone as far as they could possibly go. Because they have taken the world to the edge of a precipice. They can go no further. Going further means nuclear war or World War III, well, call it what you like. In any case, things either in a war disappear, we all disappear altogether, or if we survive, things will change radically. Nothing will go back to what it was, because they are at the edge now. Evil will always take you to the edge, but never wins in the end, It never does. Honestly. Something always breaks at the end. Ultimate victory they never have. Do much damage in its trail to get to that edge of the precipice, but never really win absolutely at the end. So there you have them all, they are, at the moment, they are like King Kong, gesticulate, lashing out everywhere. The Pope too. He's just been promoting pervert cardinals. I think he has promoted 80% of people who agree with him, just to ensure the next one. But never mind. Abusing his power. So you see. The fact is that it's at the very end, and this is the good news, that everything is going to change. Up to now, evil, wickedness, I don't know what word to use, disguised itself as being good. In politics, in economics, in anything else, banking, wages, whatever. Politicians, we had politicians and PR people and advertising and all this, and the wrongful use of economics and psychology and medicine, etc., all these wrongful ways of going about it. They, up to now, they could more or less persuade us about pretty much of everything. We took it for granted that they exaggerated sometimes, and perhaps, and all politicians lied a little bit and so on, but never were we aware that truth and reality had been inverted altogether, turned upside down. And all the time then knowing what they were doing and laughing all the way to the bank, as it were. Literally. And having to fight against this was difficult. But it's even more difficult now. Everything is much more evident now. A little aside here. Let us please stop voting for what they tell us they are going to do or have done or are going to do or are doing, please, because it's not really a question anymore about what they will do. It's a question now when we choose them, our representatives. It's a question of character. It's a question of discernment. Do they have a moral discernment? Because at the moment, those who get to the top appear to have none. They appear to be almost amoral. It's like morally autistic. You could argue this is actually the only way that you can now succeed in this political and economic system that they have created and are at pains to maintain. To be successful in it, you cannot stop at considering how anything you do will affect others, not in a moral sense. It's all about you and your own interests and your own careers. And if you can possibly derive a sense of guilt or of shame about what you might do to others with what you approve, or in that case you won't succeed. The system itself is almost evil, created by evil. Created, certainly, perhaps that's an exaggeration, but certainly anti-Christian, certainly anti-Catholic. It was introduced gradually, step by step, and we didn't notice, because these kind of things are always done gradually from behind, in the dark, in secret meetings. So what we have to discern is, does this or that politician have principles? Does he or she have a moral discernment upon, how to judge something morally and ethically? At the moment, practically none. They wouldn't have gotten there in the first place if they had. Politicians have opinions about everything, but many have very little moral discernment. Actually, more and more, you could say they don't even have opinions themselves. Their opinions are sort of extracted from above. But let's move on. But this is a fundamental issue, a fundamental trait should be in electing these people, should be whether they can still be touched by moral discernment, to be aware of the times we live in. And you see, what is happening in the whole of the population is they're creating this uncertainty, this sense of crisis, continuous chaos. Because that's what they want. A continuous generating of anguish in the population. How about what is going to happen about this? What is going to happen about that? How about my pension? How about a million things? Insurance, cost of living, will there be a war, another pandemic? All these we are nourished continually, yes. And of course, through the media, they have an official loudspeaker, the town crier of old, yeah? And the people in the media are paid to tell you, like the town crier, what the government and the powerful want you to know. That's all. And so this continuous anguish, because no one believes them anyway, and we don't know what's happening tomorrow, which is where we have no idea of what might happen tomorrow, which is where they want you, as I said. But we, the powerless, increasingly are unable to face a situation because of this anguish and this continuous tension. We find it more and more difficult to address these kind of situations with some temperance and moderation. Now, how about a politician, a truly Christian politician, who really sincerely wants to do something different? In other words, someone in power with the power to act independently, who truly wants to help the people. Do these people exist? Well, there are sometimes people who have achieved, great power, wealth, success, and not very many, but perhaps we can find one or two who says, well, I don't want, a 20th airplane or, another mansion or something. Those are the majority. They enjoy their wealth and they get in this degenerate spiral. But one or two might say, look, I have all this. I mean, why don't I use them to help that poor, the little guy? Why not do something for those poor bastards who just, get up every morning and have these jobs and they're getting just screwed every time. I mean, why don't, you might find one or two. It is within the realms of possibility. Because you see, if not, I mean, each individual person, each individual politician has to deal really with this huge beast, let's say in Congress or in Parliament. And this thing that is everywhere, this power, this cultural, political, economic power that is everywhere, is very difficult for one single politician or one single person of goodwill to fight against in Congress, in Parliament. How are you supposed to? I know that we all blame them individually, but how is one particular person going to fight this beast which is everywhere? Because it is no longer a little calf, not even a young bull anymore. Huge, enormous, and powerful. No longer weighs 50 pounds. It weighs 500. It is difficult for the one politician to confront this power alone. It is practically impossible. And this is what I'm saying. What has changed in the last 300 years is that the concept of the common good and justice for all has turned into this new God, this new Baal, a new God of gods, that golden calf. progressivism and so on. No politician by himself can actually now achieve electoral success without paying homage to this Baal. No one by himself can oppose this Baal, this new god, this golden calf. One that demands a tribute of practically human blood. Why? And if this new interpretation of liberal democracy, this progressivism, is a religion now, who are its priests? Who are the ones dictating from above these doctrines of progressivism and postmodernism? And so now we have confrontation. No longer disagreement about different political stands, but open, direct confrontation if you go against it. And this one particular person will have to confront this Baal himself, all by himself. So we can no longer depend on individual politicians by themselves. I don't think they can fight this thing independently. We have to focus on the apex, on the top. We are not individually all guilty of this state of affairs. We might be to a certain extent responsible. Yes, we were not paying attention to these things getting so bad. We had a life, we had things to do, we had the work to do, but to a certain extent responsible because we didn't see it coming and we just let it grow and grow. But I don't think we are morally to blame. I don't think so. The guilty ones, and I'm not going to talk solely about the power elite, I'm referring to those in the church, actually, those in the church who have allowed, without speaking out, for the mores of society to have so changed. They have allowed that without raising an eyebrow. And that is the church hierarchy. They are the culpable ones. You cannot put the blame on individuals and individual families. They should have spoken out. They are the culpable ones, I say. Those precisely whose the garments they wear should remind them every day of the duty they have to shed their blood for Christ if need be. I mean, in defense of the faith. And they haven't. They haven't spoken out. They're still not speaking out. They just went along with it all. Let us not fool ourselves. If there is no Catholic counterweight, or Christian counterweight after all, but I say the Catholic, as I said, because I'm Catholic, but also because the church is hierarchical. It's actually the only hierarchical organization left. If they don't use their weight, well, this is what happens. It is they who must lead on this. They who must promote Christian ethics. It is they who should have spoken out. It is they who should have helped No good leaving all that to the individual person to complain, to the individual politician to fight. They are powerless. They can't fight that beast by themselves, individually. They, the church's hierarchy, are the only ones who could have incentivized a true Christian presence in political debate. Not only did they not do that, but they have actually incentivized non-Catholic or anti-Catholic or non-Christian policies. They have promoted anti-Catholic political parties and policies, disguised sometimes on things like, oh, but this political party is the lesser of two evils, things like that. And then, of course, one sole Christian politician is helpless because he finds himself in this chain of abstentionism, if the word exists, passivity, cooperation with the enemy, under this excuse, under this cloak of the lesser evil. And then, of course, the individual politician is dead, the one who wants to fight back. So I wouldn't blame individuals or individual politicians as such. It is the hierarchy that failed. The power comes from demands from excuse me. The beast, their power comes from, those demands come from higher international, transnational organizations, secret international societies and so on, who actually have an agenda, and that agenda, rabidly anti-Christian, certainly anti-Catholic, is being demanded of those politicians and is being carried out and executed by all political parties. The so-called left, with their revolutionary tactics, destroying society's cohesion of the common good, and on the other hand, the conservatives also, conserving that revolution. The ones did the revolution and the other ones conserved the revolution. And that agenda is global, international. And which is the only international, global, hierarchical institution to combat this other global, international, hierarchical institution? It is the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church decided not to do it. And the Catholic Church renounced doing this. To be fair, it had already been taken over, we know, infiltrated at first, now completely taken over, so of course it is carrying out their agenda, which is the same anyway. They could have spoken out earlier. Christianity has been under attack openly. They have been attacking its doctrine, its mores directly, undermining them, as I said, for 300 years now openly. Before that, I have said this in many other videos, Christianity has been under attack since Christ was killed on the cross. But nevertheless, as a system of government now, actively, certainly for the last 300 years with the Enlightenment, there has been plenty of time to react. Now we have to endure centuries of defeat. It could have come to their mind that the solution was the solution could be appeasement with the world. That is what they thought. That was wrong, perhaps for some time. Now they have been going along with every different wave. But the solution is not to go along with every possible wave. That is not the solution. The solution for the Catholic and Christian Church, Catholic teaching and the Catholic tradition, we have to see that it didn't work to go along with it. It leads to its practical distraction. Obviously, it didn't work. A Catholic tradition, I said. A concept absolutely and inextricably linked to what the Church is or should be. What is tradition? Something that you receive and have to transmit to other generations, one generation after another. Something that you have received and you have to hand over and transmit to the next generation. It's a faith that has to be transmitted to the next generation. The faith of the apostles that has to be transmitted to the next generations. I give you what I myself have received, says St. Paul. And that is the absolute failure of the Catholic Church today, and it has been for a long time. And I'm ranting about the Catholic Church because I am one, and it's like, it's not that I hate it, it's because I love it. It's like seeing your mother just, and you have to do something about it. Not just from and this comes not just from Vatican II, okay? That's when the takeover of the Church was actually visibly put into effect. But this not passing over, not transmitting the faith, has been going on for a long time. There has been many breaks in this, passing on the faith and the tradition. Successive breaks, where what had been received was not handed over to the next generation, as if it could be something that you could change according to your own desires. That's not what you're there for. And now in the end, many Catholics have given up because we cannot by ourselves individually fight this beast. It's too late. The Church committed a grave error at one point. Knowing, seeing, experiencing in its bones that political and social organization was becoming more and more hostile to Christianity, and realizing that Catholics were no longer a majority in other countries, yes, the Church made a serious error, and that was to go along with it and think that in any case the last line of defense was the family. As long as the family was there, everything would be okay. Oh, really? As if their enemies would not see it too. And so the enemy was going to be attacked. And so the family became the thing to be attacked. Obviously, So they left it to individual families, as if the family as an the family as an institution, left alone floating on this ocean of political change, of anti-family and anti-Christian philosophies, I don't know what to call them, as if by itself it could stand firm, floating about by itself only in this ocean of anti-family. So the struggle has to be not each individual person, not each individual politician, not each individual family. It has to be at an institutional level. Because unless it is done at an institutional level, it will lead to another failure. What's happened is that they have condemned Christians to a continuous state of extreme tension, societal tension, exhaustion, in a society radically anti-Christian, where this anti-Christian penetration is so thoroughly effective. The possibility of educating your Catholic children in the Catholic faith, your Christian children in the Christian faith, is each day more and more difficult. The opportunities scarce. It is rather optimistic for Christians, I think, now to... It's an optimistic view, I think, for Christians to say of themselves, to start comparing themselves with the first Christians, for example. We hear that sometimes, we'll have to go back to the catacombs. Yes, the first Christians were killed and persecuted. Their bodies were killed. They did not kill their souls, though. They killed their bodies. Many first Christians actually were even able to survive the persecutions, because they would, between persecutions, they would leave the urban areas and move away to rural ones, where the edicts of the emperors sometimes did not even reach. They could kind of sometimes escape. It is not possible for us to escape now. It is not a question of killing the body, it's killing the soul. In a situation where we cannot escape, it's everywhere. Today the possibilities of educating your children in the faith is less and less possible. You might do your best at home, but then what happens? Their peers, the internet, the schools themselves, what are they teaching them? All around them. It's everywhere anti-Christian content. So it is, at the moment, a lost battle. But my point precisely is that you cannot just leave it to families alone, individual families alone. The struggle has to be taken to institutions. The fight has to be open, public, in the political arena. The personal moral order cannot be separated from public moral order. The Church has renounced on this. Well, they still talk about, abortion. Yeah. But there is more than abortion here. Abortion may be the effect of against abortion is fine. But they don't speak up about so many other areas. Savage capitalism, for example. And you go with this easy thing, we are against abortion. Okay. But look what is happening. Because a family might tell you, look, have more children. Well, look, I earn $2,000 a month. I can hardly make ends meet. Are you asking me to have more children? There are no jobs. We can't even get enough money together to buy a small little apartment. How can I have more children? The defense of the family has to be included in a larger context. No one fought that context, and now it is the family that is being attacked. It is not enough to just talk about abortion or to go around, love one another, be good. Oh, how good it is good. It's good to be good. How easy. Lazy. Cowardly. Is the answer of the ones who no longer believe. Or if they believe, have nothing to contribute. Just want an easy life. In the political sphere, the church has to offer a contrary vision. Chesterton, I mentioned him at the very beginning, actually saw this, in early 20th century. In the 1920s. He said explicitly that, for example, he was talking about what he called anti-nativism. That thing that, the eugenics and so on, against reproducing, against having more children, that thing that was so powerful at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 19th century. And he called it out, he called it anti-nativism. He meant that antipathy for more babies being born, which ended up, as I said, in eugenics and all the rest of it. And he said that this was the main instrument capitalism had in order to succeed. My goodness, what has capitalism got to do with the number of babies? Well, apparently quite a bit. Because when this new liberal order started launching this competition between the sexes, men and women, and competition between the young and the old, and competition between parents and children, at the moment, he said, when the people come to prefer, he said, a radio set or a record player set. He said, when they come to think of that, rather than have another child, capitalism won. And Chesterton, based on the teachings of Pope Leo XIII, realized that the fight had to be a political fight. Not enough to go to the individual families, have more children. That's where the battle is. Political, educational, at the institutions. And it should be one institution that should be there preaching a different way. And they haven't. And they are not. Hopefully soon there will be. I leave you there. Thank you, and bye-bye.